Good morning. My name's Daryl Wildberg, and as you can see, my little tie clip. Oh, you thought I was going to go up here, didn't you? Yeah. Jehovah's Witness right here. A Jehovah's Witness. In good standing. Now, this video is not approved by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. It's not. I don't work for any man on the face of this earth. I wish the apostates could let that sink in. Neither does any other Jehovah's Witness. We have one single leader. One. And his name is Jesus Christ. Normally I don't take requests. But I got an email where an individual asked me to do a video on 1914. And such that is a good topic because many of you apostates have deviated from the truth of 1914 and captured your apostate views that the Jehovah's Witnesses said that the end of the world was coming in 1914. Show me an article where they said that the end of this world or Armageddon was coming in 1914 or 1975. Show me one single article that says in point Armageddon will be here in 1914. Armageddon will be here in 1975. Show me that article. Let me clue you in. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Imagine that, huh? All you idiots out there who are like sheeple and you just move right ahead forward like a steamroller to the propaganda by the apostates. In 1870, C.T. Russell and some of his friends began trying to worship God according to the Bible and to help others to do so. This included helping people who spoke various languages. So Zion's Watchtower Tract Society was legally formed in 1884, and Brother Russell became the president. He studied the Bible very carefully with his friends and was not afraid to tell others that church teachings such as the Trinity, hellfire, the immortality of the soul were not in the Bible. He learned that Christ's return would be invisible and that the appointed times of the nations would end in 1914. Luke 21:24. Brother Russell used his time, energy, and all of his money to teach these truths to others. Now it is clear that Jehovah and Jesus used Brother Russell to take the lead at an important time in history. But make no doubt about it, Brother Russell was no prophet. He was no miracle worker. We didn't have any gifts. So now Brother Russell did not want any special attention from people. In fact, in 1896 he wrote that he and other responsible men did not want to be honored at all. They did not want to be given any special titles, even though the folks gave Brother Russell the title of pastor. They used to call him Pastor Russell. And these men did not want any group to be called by their name. He later said, "This is not man's work." Now, how many other religions at the top hierarchy of religions have said that? And our brothers today still believe that this is not man's work. I'm telling you that what I do here is not man's work. No. Now, there were postponed expectations. We naturally long for the good things that Jehovah has promised. In fact, when Jehovah's prophet Habakkuk expressed a yearning for Jehovah to bring an end to the wicked conditions in Judah, Jehovah instructed him to keep in expectation. But it never happened in Habakkuk's time. Never happened. When the fulfillment of our expectations appears to be delayed, like some of you who fell away from the truth may have experienced years past, it can dampen our enthusiasm. We could even lose heart, like some of you did. Proverbs 13:20. This happened at the beginning of the 20th century, so it's nothing new. At that time, many anointed Christians expected to receive their heavenly reward in 1914. See, they expected to be taken up, which many call the rapture, in 1914. They did expect that. But you see, that's a prophecy, and the only thing the brothers got wrong was the time fulfillment of that prophecy. So you see, when people claim that our prophets were wrong and therefore deserve death, they're sadly mistaken. Merely quoting prophets, prior prophets, is what we do. There are no new prophecies. They're all located in that book we call the Bible. They're all there. So we didn't come up with any brand new prophecies. How stupid it is when you hear these moronic apostates acclaim that we were false prophets, or anybody for that. Not prophets. Although collectively now, the whole entire organization can be considered a prophet. Because why? Not because we come up with new prophecies, because we repeat prophecies. Therefore, as a group, we are a prophet, repeating prophecies. Yeah, it's just that simple. Now consider the example of two loyal ones who met such a challenge. Brother Royal Spatz was baptized in 1908 at the age of 20. He was very confident that he would soon receive his reward. In fact, when he proposed marriage in 1911 to his prospective bride, Pearl, you know what is going to happen in 1914. If we are going to get married, we better do it soon, dear. Did this Christian couple give up race for life when they did not receive their heavenly reward in 1914? No, because their primary focus was on faithfully doing God's will, not on gaining their reward. They were determined to run that race with endurance. And indeed, Royal and Pearl remained active and faithful until they finished their earthly courses many decades later. No doubt you long to see Jehovah vindicate his name and sovereignty and fulfill all his promises. Or you might have at one time. Be assured that these things will happen in Jehovah's due time. Until then, may we keep busy serving our true God, never allowing postponed expectations to discourage us or slow us down. Let me explain something to you right here. Jehovah God knew the exact nanosecond that Armageddon would begin back in the Garden of Eden, when he proclaimed in Genesis 3:15 that first prophecy. When he proclaimed that first prophecy, Jehovah God knew the exact day that Armageddon would begin. Nobody else did. Just Jehovah God. It wasn't necessary. In 1919, 3 years after Brother Russell's death, Jesus appointed what we now refer to the faithful and discreet slave, Matthew 24:45. And what was the purpose for that slave? They were to give his followers food at the proper time. They were not appointed as leaders. Even during those early years, a small group of anointed brothers at headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, provided spiritual food to Jesus' followers. The expression governing body began appearing in our publications after 1940, I'm sorry. Now, at that time, the governing body was closely connected with directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. However, in 1971, it was made clear that the governing body was different from the Watchtower Society, which was responsible for legal matters only. From then on, anointed brothers could become part of the governing body without being society directors. More recently, responsible brothers of the other sheep have served as directors of the society and of other corporations used by God's people. As a result, the governing body can focus on providing Bible instruction and direction, John 10:16, Acts 6:4. The July 15, 2013 issue of the Watchtower explained that the faithful and discreet slave is a small group of anointed brothers who make up the governing body. It is not all the anointed. The governing body makes important decisions as a group when its members meet together each week. Meeting this way helps them to have close communication and stay united, Proverbs 20:18. No member of the governing body is more important than the other members. So each year, a different brother takes the lead at those meetings. 1 Peter 5:1. This is also the case in each of the 6 committees of the governing body. No member of the governing body feels that he is the leader of his brothers. Okay? Each of them is also one of the domestics and receives spiritual food from the faithful slave, just as the other domestics do. And he follows its direction. Soon after World War I broke out in 1914, it became apparent that mankind had entered that era, a troubled time on earth that the Bible calls the last days. You can read about those last days in 2 Timothy 3:1 through 5. Those 5 scriptures, in fact, I'll tell you what, let's go there right now to 2 Timothy 3, and we're going to consider 1 through 5. This is an important set of scriptures here. Now, I'm going to quote from the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, but grab any Bible you got. 2 Timothy 3:1 through 5. But know this, that in the last days, critical times, hard to deal with, will be here. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, haughty, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful and disloyal, having no natural affection, not open to any agreement, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, without love of goodness, betrayers, headstrong, puffed up with pride, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having an appearance of godliness, but proving false to its power, and from these turn away. Having appearance of godly devotion. In other words, they go to church on Sunday and say their masses and ask for forgiveness and all of this, and then Monday through Saturday they go out and do the same things they did last week. Now those 5 scriptures could be placed on any newspaper on the headlines today, anywhere in the world. Those 5 scriptures. Why have we seen conditions that are worse, not better, since Jesus received his crown in 1914? Because at that time Jesus began ruling in heaven, not on earth. War then broke out in heaven, and a newly installed king, Jesus, referred to as Michael, cast Satan and his demons to the earth. Revelation 12:7 through 9 and verse 12. Confirmed here, Satan has been full of rage ever since, knowing that his days are numbered. Indeed, it will not be long before God will carry out his will against Satan here on the earth, Matthew 6:10. Now, let us see how the other 3 horsemen help to confirm that we are in fact living in the troubled last day. Remember, there were 4. Actually, there were 5, but we know of 4. Unlike that first horseman, who is Jesus the Christ, who clearly pictures a specific individual, the 3 that follow represent global conditions that have swept across human society. How do we know Jesus began his rule in 1914, the time of the end? the turning point in our time, a dividing line in history. An age of violence, these are terms used by modern historians to describe the epoch that began with the outbreak of World War I. What startling significance lies in their observation? The answer affects your life today. No date in history affects the destiny of every living person so much as the year 1914. That year marked a turning point in the affairs of men. World conditions since 1914 have taken a turn for the worse. War has ravaged the earth. Inflation has strangled the world. Countries once prosperous are now plagued with poverty and revolutions. Great empires have collapsed. Whole nations and islands hardly known before 1914 have become world problems. Mankind lives in the soul-chilling shadow of atomic annihilation. All this, grimly true as it is, does not explain why world conditions are exactly as they are today. It does not explain why 1914 is that turning point, nor does it explain why 1914 affects your everlasting destiny. What then explains that matter? In 1914, mankind entered the long foretold time of the end. Only one book tells of the time of the end. And that book is the Bible. Its prophecies, for the most part, have their major fulfillment in that time of the end, and then an understanding of these prophecies would be available to truth seekers. You had them. You understood them once upon a time, but you don't anymore because you turned your back on them. Daniel 12:4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and sealed the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Lack of the knowledge concerning the time of the end leads to death. How vital, then, to have the right answers to certain questions. What is to end? Now, Jehovah God has decreed that this earth must eventually become a global paradise, with its inhabitants enjoying everlasting life in perfect health and happiness. So what is to end could not be this literal earth. For the Bible plainly declares, the earth abideth forever. So what is to end in this evil system or state of things? This means that the world that mankind has known ever since the days of Noahian flood will soon be blotted out. A righteous new world will take its place. So the news that 1914 brought the beginning of the end for what Bible calls the present wicked system of things should be a source of great joy for all right-hearted persons. Ecclesiastes 1:4, Galatians 1:4. Christ Jesus, the greatest prophet that ever lived, pointed forward to the time of the end. He called it the consummation of a system of things. The word consummation, Greek centelia, is interesting. This is because centelia combines the preposition with sin with the noun end, telos. So the word indicates that several things would work together or with one another to terminate in a complete end. The consummation, centelia, about which the disciples asked, is the same as the time of the end. It is a period that has a beginning and a completion, has a start and an end. Telos, Matthew 13:39, Matthew 24:3. How does the time of the end come to its completion? It closes with the mighty battle of Armageddon in the Bible. The war of the great day of God the Almighty. Now, this war results in the destruction of all the governments of the earth and abyssing the devil and his demons, the wicked people, and the unrighteous. Since 1914, the devil has learned he has only a short period of time. Revelation 16:14, Revelation 12:12. How do we know for certainty that 1914 marks the beginning of the time of the end? You know, this is only part one of 3 parts. This is going to be in 3 parts because it is deep. And I'll tell you why we know this is the time of the end. The beginning of it is because the Gentile times, or the appointed times of the nations, ended in 1914. As far back as 1880, the Watchtower magazine declared that 1914 would mark the end of the Gentile times. They did not say it would mark the end of this system of things, or the end of the world at Armageddon. Like I tell you, hey, any one of you genius apostates, show me an article that reads, Armageddon will begin in 1914. Show me that argument. Show me that article. Briefly, these appointed times of the nations refer to a period when no representative government of Jehovah God would exist on the earth. But the Gentile nations would dominate the earth. Jesus had said Jerusalem will be trampled on by the nations until the appointed times of the nations are fulfilled. Luke 21:24. With the overthrow of Jehovah's typical theocratic government, the nation of Israel, in 607 BCE, theocratic rule in the earth ended. 7 times, or a period of 2,520 years, must pass before a new theocratic government toward our earth could begin operation. This new government would be a heavenly government, a heavenly kingdom under Christ Jesus. The king would rule from heaven while the devil's world was still a going concern. So there was need for a sign. True to prophecy, when the 2,520 years of Gentile domination ended in 1914, the great sign of times made its appearance. World War I broke out in 1914. And the consummation, or the time of the end, began. Daniel and Jesus foretell World War. That World War I pointed up to the time of the end is clear from Daniel's prophecy, likening the democratic powers to the king of the south and the autocratic powers to the king of the north. The prophet wrote, "And at that time of the end shall the king of the south contend with him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into countries, and shall overflow and pass through." These military movements affecting the earth from north to south could not begin, as Daniel says, until the time of the end. Now, from Jesus' words, we also know that World War I marked the beginning of the time of the end. He spoke of the close of the time of the end by using the word telos, meaning an accomplished end. Why does not the accomplished end occur immediately in 1914? Well, at the close of the appointed times of the nations, Jesus explains that question. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. All these things are a beginning of pangs of distress. Matthew 24:7-8. The pangs of distress began in 1914 with total warfare, an all-out war for global domination, the like of which had never occurred before in history. And explaining further what the pangs of distress include, Jesus said there would be on the earth anguish of nations, not knowing the way out, because of the roaring of the sea and its agitation. Men will become faint out of fear and expectation of the things coming upon the inhabited earth. Today, any observing person can perceive the pangs of distress upon all the nations of the earth. Yet the masses of people fail to find any significant in it. Anything significant. Oh, they're quick to say that times are worse than ever before. But when they are told of Jesus' prophecy concerning the time of the end, they scoff and ridicule. You do. Strange. Is that strange? No, because see, the ridiculers of the great sign of the times were to be so numerous in the time of the end, or last days, that they in themselves would constitute part of the sign. And the last days there will come ridiculers with their ridicule, proceeding according to their own desires and saying, where is this promised presence of his? Many of you have said it. Why, from the day of our forefathers fell asleep in death, all things are continuing exactly as from creation's beginning. Luke 21:25 and 26, 2 Peter 3:3 and 4. Why do scoffers scoff? Because their own desires are selfish. They want to hang on to this present system of things for their own selfish gain. So they willingly refuse to see the pangs of distress foretold by Jesus. They claim that all things are continuing exactly as from creation's beginning, because we have always had wars, famines, and earthquakes. The scoffers fail to realize that the sign Jesus gave is not comprised of an isolated earthquake here or a war there, but rather all the happenings must occur concurrently upon one generation in intensified doses. Now, if we carefully analyze the pangs of distress that Jesus foretold at Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, I think, or is it 10? 13. Can we honestly say that since 1914 all things are continuing exactly as from creation's beginning? Absolutely no. It is interesting to note that many of the intellectuals of the world, the philosophers, the scientists, the sages, and the historians are quick to admit that since 1914 there has been a striking change. Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, not long ago declared, ever since 1914, the world has been reeling drunkenly toward disaster. An editorial in the Washington Times-Herald from March 13, 1945 stated this: the last completely normal year in history was 1913, the year before World War I began. Dr. Harold C. Urey, one of the world's leading creators of the atom bomb, said, we have not had a peaceful world since 1914. That was in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, December 9, 1951. Declared an editorial writer in the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegram, August 1st, 1954, 40 years ago, the world overnight goose-stepped from the Golden Age into a volcanic epoch marked by bloody wars. An editorial in the Edmonton Journal of Alberta, Canada, dated August 7, 1954, explains further. It seems likely that when the history of the 20th century is written, August 4th, 1914, the day of hostilities became general in Europe, will loom larger than even the date of the outbreak of the Second World War or the dropping of the atomic bomb. That August day, August 4th, 1914, we are beginning to realize marked a dividing line in history. An era of peace, progress, security ended, and an age of war and revolution began. This same observation was made by an associate professor of history at Columbia University's Barnard College, who wrote in the Scientific Monthly of July 1951, "It is indeed the year 1914 rather than that of Hiroshima, which marks the turning point in our time. For by now we can see that whatever the future may hold in store, it was the First World War that ushered in the era of confused transition in the midst of which we are floundering." And when making a comparison of the two world wars, the New York Times magazine of August 1st, 1954 came to this conclusion: the First War marked a far greater change in history. It closed a long era of general peace and began a new age of violence, in which the Second War is simply an episode. Since 1914, the world has had a new character, a character of international anarchy. Thus, the First World War marks a turning point in modern history. Such terms as a turning point in modern history, an age of violence, an age of war and revolution, and a volcanic epoch used by leading authorities ought to jar scoffers into some sensible thinking. for certain things, for of a certainty things are not continuing exactly as from creation's beginning. The time of the end is come. The sign of the last days is visible evidence. Never before in history, prior to 1914, have all these things at once occurred once upon a generation at the same time. There's the sign of Scripture proof. World wars, Matthew 24:7. Widespread of food shortages, Matthew 24:7. Unusual number of earthquakes, Matthew 24:7. Sore pestilence and disease, Luke 21:11. Persecution of Christians, Luke 21:12-15. Right now, today, my brothers in Russia, Eritrea, and in most of the Arab countries are undergoing persecution. Many forsaken Christianity, Matthew 24:12 and 13. Formation of the League of Nations and then the United Nations, Revelation 13:14, 15. Revelation 17:11. Nations perplexed, Luke 21:25. Increased lawlessness, crime, Matthew 24:12. Sleepy condition of the world despite the sign, 1 Thessalonians 5:2 and 6. Moral breakdown in public and private life, 2 Timothy 3:1-4. Widespread juvenile delinquency, 2 Timothy 3:2. People overly engaging in everyday affairs of life, Matthew 24:37 and 39. And the last and final, the 14th, worldwide preaching of the established kingdom as good news, Matthew 24:14. You see, before the time of the end closes, the people must be warned. So Jesus foretold this good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth for a purpose of a witness to all the nations, and then the accomplished end will come. To people who are heartsick because of this present wicked world, the news of God's established kingdom and the time of the end is indeed good news. Jehovah's Witnesses have been diligent to bring this good news to the peoples of all the earth for over 100 years. When the preaching work is finished, the accomplished end comes. This does not mean that when the time of the end closes, the mass of mankind will have decided for God's kingdom. No, the mass will stick with the cold, old world, even though the warning witness has been given earthwide. Remember, Noah preached for 40 years, over 40 years, and did he change anybody? His 3 sons and their wives, there were only 8 people. Imagine how frustrated Noah became. Thus multitudes will be abandoned to their self-chosen destiny of destruction. Jesus said, I tell you, in that night 2 men will be in one bed. The one will be taken along, but the other will be abandoned. There will be 2 women grinding at the same mill. One will be taken along, but the other will be abandoned. To be taken into Jehovah's protection at Armageddon depends not on any family or friendship ties. It depends on a clear-cut decision for God's new world. Those who choose to go along with the old world will, as Jesus showed, be abandoned to destruction, just as the pre-flood people were left to their watery death when the world at that time suffered destruction when it was deluged with water. Matthew 24:14, Luke 17:34 and 35, 2 Peter 3:6. Truly I tell you, declared Jesus, that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur. So this generation from 1914 shall not pass to the times of the end closes with the great tribulation, such as not occurred since the world's beginning until now. No, nor will occur again. But when you say the generation of 1914, you have to remember the overlapping. That's for another video. Those who are left to their self-chosen destiny or destruction pay the penalty of everlasting death. That could be you. Hopefully not. So since we are living in a destiny-making time, do not wait until face-to-face with the accomplished end. of the system of things, that will be too late. Decide now for the new world. Give proof of your decision by associating with the already formed new world society, so to speak. Share in the warning witness now being given. Then you will be in line to survive this world's accomplished end and inherit everlasting life in a perfect new world. Matthew 24:34. Now's the time. Thanks for watching this video of 1914. There are others to come. Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you.